Good morning, everyone. My name is John Carlton, and for a few minutes longer, I am the president of the Board of Governors of our Jewish Federation. I want to welcome all of you to this, our second, and I hope, very last virtual annual meeting. As you know, we had intended to return live and in person this year, but the Omicron variant had other things in mind. But it's heartening to see that despite this change in plans, you have taken the time to attend yet another in what must seem like an endless series of Zoom meetings. Now, each of you has control of your view using the view button in the upper right corner, so you can watch this either in gallery view and see a selection of everyone who's watching, or in speaker view, and we recommend that you use speaker view. I would now invite our executive director, Jason Moss, to say a few words about the Kimberly Dawn Ellis Memorial Scholarship.
Good morning, everyone. Following her tragic automobile accident in 1997, Kimberly Ellis's parents, Cy and Marilyn Ellis, who were active community members, established a memorial scholarship. At the time of her death, Kim was a student at Pepperdine Law School. She had a strong Jewish commitment and demonstrated this commitment over the years through her active involvement in BBYO and Jewish Day Camp. This $500 scholarship is awarded annually to a graduating high school senior planning to attend a four-year college. And this year's recipient is Sylvie Thompson. As a way to illustrate a little bit more about Sylvie, I'm going to read the essay she submitted with her scholarship application so you can learn a little bit more about her. Being Jewish is a big part of my identity. I've grown up with a Jewish culture and have experienced many wonderful things within the community. I've had the opportunity to be involved in various activities, groups, and events that strengthen my love and understanding of what being Jewish means to me. Since I was little, I've been a part of a Reconstructionist or Reform congregation and participated in Sunday school every week. I could interact with other Jewish kids my age since my neighborhoods and schools were majority non-Jewish. I learned about Jewish values, holidays, and history in class, as well as met with Holocaust survivors, listened to talks about anti-Semitism, made humantaschen and matzo ball soup with my congregation. I've also been a part of the Tov Chai youth group through Temple Beth David and Temple City since 8th grade. In the group, Jewish teenagers meet with each other about once a month. We hang out and talk or participate in different activities and events. Every year we do a chocolate Seder for Passover, and a couple of years ago, we put up the congregation's sukkah for Sukkot. And an event called Into the Night, sponsored by the Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center USY chapter, I did 1 year ago, also involved different Jewish teenagers in the greater Pasadena area. We did many activities together from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., like fencing and laser tag. I got to know a lot of Jewish people that I hadn't met before that were very similar in age. Hanging out with other Jewish teenagers has been a great way for me to have a strong Jewish connection and community. There have also been multiple events that I have participated in to increase my involvement in the greater Jewish community and to further my learning of different Jewish cultural aspects. I volunteered for the Jewish Food Festival a few years ago by doing different odds and ends for vendors and attendees that needed help. I also got to walk around and try a bunch of different foods that either I hadn't tried or heard of before, like cholent. Additionally, I have recited Holocaust victim names during Every Person Has a Name every year since 9th grade at Pasadena City Hall with other members of the Jewish community. Everything I've been involved in has increased my knowledge of Judaism and furthered my connection to the community. Through meeting so many different people from various subgroups, denominations, nationalities, and ages in the Jewish community, I've realized that someone's Jewish identity is different for every person, and what it means to them is unique. Each person is complicated in their own way, so understanding that helps with me becoming a more open-minded person and less judgmental towards others. For me, being Jewish is to respect others and who they want to be religiously and otherwise. So Sylvie's name will be listed with other recipients on this perpetual plaque that's housed at the Jewish Federation. As you can see, it says it's honoring the life of Kimberly Dawn Ellis. Live well, laugh often, love much. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Sylvie Thompson.
Hello, I'm Sylvie Thompson. I'm currently a senior at Arcadia High School. To Mr. and Mrs. Ellis and to the Kimberly Dawn Ellis Scholarship Community, thank you very much. It's a really big honor for me to get this scholarship, and it will really greatly help me for college. I have always valued and loved being a part of the Jewish community, and the scholarship will just help me like fuel my interest in my Jewish identity and kind of like further learn about being Jewish and what that means to me. Thank you so much for this honor and this opportunity in honor of Kimberly Dawn Ellis, and I hope to keep her memory and legacy alive.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Sylvie. At this point, I would normally spend some time highlighting the Federation's accomplishments of the past year. This morning, Jason will give you some of those details. As I finish my 4 years as president, I just want to say a few words about the people who have kept the Federation going through these difficult times. First, I can't say enough about our staff. Everyone has held together, planning and revising and replanning through ever-changing circumstances, and sometimes improvising on the fly to assure that our programming has in total been able to continue. Judy Sofer has kept our cultural arts program going strong, both virtually and in person, in the face of wild swings in COVID restrictions on rehearsals, performances, and attendance. Debbie Singer, with the assistance of Robin Brahinsky, has done the same with PJ Library, continuing to build this amazing program that connects with the youngest members of our community. Ben Phelps has not yet experienced a normal year as director of Camp Gan Shalom, but he managed to put together a successful camp between COVID surges. Kim Benaji has been a real stalwart, overseeing the book festival, Every Person Has a Name, and other events, all while relocating to Israel with her family. Karen Galliana has held down the fort in the office through everything, doing whatever needs to be done with competence and a smile. And Susan Hain has maintained our bookkeeping and financial records with a keen eye and a steady hand. And of course, Jason Moss, our executive director, has pitched in now and again too. Actually, he is the glue that holds it all together. He has rolled with the punches, many punches, during the past several years, always remaining positive and constructive. He has been and is the face and voice of the Federation through good years and bad. As president, I have worked closely with him over these last 4 years, and it has been my pleasure to do so. Not least, I also want to acknowledge our Board of Governors. I have served on boards with other organizations over many years, but this is one of the most collegial and constructive in my experience. Everyone consistently brings a remarkable and very rare level of energy, creativity, and selfless focus to bear in promoting the mission of the Federation, to strengthen and enhance our Jewish community. Lastly, but not least, I want to thank our donors and supporters who have continued to buoy the Federation through these troubled times. As the financial information that you have received a link to shows, we've been fortunate to have such generous supporters, and we have been disciplined in stewarding the resources they have provided. As a result, we are prepared to emerge from this hopefully just 2-year pandemic in a strong financial position, that will enable us to maintain and build upon our programs and services. I have been honored to serve as the Federation's president, service that has been immensely rewarding to me. For this, I cannot thank the staff, board, and supporters of the Federation enough. And now it is my duty to uninstall the 2021 officers and members of our Board of Governors. They are myself, President and CFO, Julie Miller, Vice President, Julie Solberg, Secretary, Marcia Alper, Stu Miller, David Levy, Iran Resnick, Irv Tons, Mickey Bernath, Julie Bank, and Janine Mann, all members of the Board of Governors. Thank you all for everything you have done for the Federation during this past year. You are now all officially uninstalled. Enjoy a brief moment of freedom as I now invite Marcia Alper to install the 2022 officers and Board of Governors. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Installing the Jewish Federation's Board of Governors and Officers is an integral part of the annual meeting. It is a time when we express our appreciation for the work of the current leadership, especially in these trying times, and when their accomplishments are recognized and thanks for a job well done are extended. And it is a chance to welcome new community members to our leadership as we move forward in 2022. This ceremony is the official beginning of a new and exciting term for these leaders. And to you leaders, I want to tell you, you have been elected to serve as the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valley's governor because of who you are as a person and for your experience and leadership qualities. The Board of Governors provides oversight and guidance to the organization for both organizational policy and fiduciary concerns, while working closely with the staff to strengthen and enhance Jewish life in our community. Each of you plays a very important part in the work of the Federation and requires your full support and participation. The people I shall name now are incoming members of the Board of Governors. Janine Mann, our newest board member, Julie Miller, Stu Miller, Oren Resnick, and Irv Tons. Each of you has been elected to serve as the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valley's governor because of who you are as a person and for your experience and leadership qualities. The Board of Governors provides oversight and guidance to the organization for both organizational policy and fiduciary concerns, while working closely with the staff to strengthen and enhance Jewish life in our community. Each of you plays a very important part of the work of the Jewish Federation and requires your full support and participation. Do you accept this responsibility and promise to fulfill, to the best of your ability, the duties of a governor set forth in the bylaws of the Jewish Federation? If so, please answer, I do.
I do.
Thank you. Does that mean we're married, John? In accordance with the bylaws of the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, these members have been elected and installed as governors and officers to lead and guide this organization. It is my pleasure to introduce the Jewish Federation's 2022 Board of Governors. Mickey Bernath, Janine Mann, our newest board member, Julie Miller, Stu Miller, Oren Resnick, and Irv Tons. Do you accept this responsibility and promise to fulfill to the best of your ability the duties of a governor set forth in the bylaws of the Jewish Federation? If so, answer, I do. In accordance with the bylaws of the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys, these members have been elected and installed as governors to lead and guide this organization. And now it's the turn of the officers. Julie Solberg will be coming in as president, David Levy, vice president, John Carlton, chief financial officer, and Julie Bank, our secretary. It is my pleasure to introduce these people to you as our governors and our officers. May we continue to grow together, to be successful in our efforts and in harmony with each other. I now install you all officially.
Thank you, Marcia, for the kind words. Good morning to everyone. First, I too want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. All of us at Federation truly appreciate your flexibility as we navigate the pandemic. I'm looking forward to my term as president, and am working closely with the incoming Vice President, David Levy, our incoming Secretary, Julie Bank, and our continuing CFO, John Carlton, as well as our wonderful board and our amazing staff. Thank you, David, Julie, and John, for stepping up to these positions. As we all know, the past 2 years have been anything but normal. The Federation has pivoted, along with the rest of the world, to online events, and in some cases, small in-person events. I want to thank our board, especially our most recent president, John Carlton, for so successfully navigating these challenging times. He has already told you about our staff, so I would just like to thank them and to thank our director, Jason Moss, for their continued dedication to our Jewish Federation. Without them, none of the programs we provide in the community would succeed. And I want to welcome our newest staff member, Rebecca Russell. As many of you know, we have recently completed a community-wide survey. We will be using the results of this survey to establish new programs that will meet the needs of our broad community. As we look to the future, I hope that our Federation will play a significant role in your Jewish involvement, and I hope to see all of you at many upcoming and new events, both online and in person. And now, I would like to recognize one of our longtime board members, Marcia Alper, who after many years of invaluable service is stepping down. We hope that although she will no longer be part of our monthly meetings, she will continue to be involved in our programming, and we look forward to having her now have time to volunteer for the programs that she is passionate about. Marcia joined our Federation board in 2010 and has served for 9 years, 2 of them as president. During her tenure as president, the Federation implemented and completed a broad set of community conversations to help shape our programming and interactions with the community. There were many community meetings throughout our broad geographical area, and Marcia, as president, attended as many as possible. This gave her a unique perspective, which she could then share with our board and helped create a continuity throughout the community. Marcia, we humbly thank you for your service to the Jewish Federation. We will miss having you on the board, but look forward to seeing you and having you volunteer. With that, I would like to present a couple of things to you. First, a proclamation from our county supervisor, Catherine Barger. And it says, in recognition of dedicated service to the affairs of the community and for the civic pride demonstrated by numerous contributions for the benefit of all residents of Los Angeles County. And then I would also like to present to you, as a token of our appreciation, a tzedakah box as a symbol of your generosity to the Federation. So thank you very much. I will get these things to you later today. I will drop them off, okay?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it and all the accolades. Not what I worked for, but thank you for giving them to me. Working for Federation has been well, we've been involved with Federation since we moved here, both my husband and I, and I'm just glad to step in his shoes. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, John. Thank you to the board. I look forward to working with you in the coming year as we continue to move forward. And now it gives me incredible pride to introduce our keynote speaker, who I'll be in conversation with, Dr. Stephen Windmueller. So let me just read his bio so you understand who he is. He is actually returning back to our community. He spoke at our annual meeting in 2015 on a very different topic, but let me reintroduce him to our community. Dr. Stephen Windmueller is an emeritus professor of Jewish communal studies at the Jack H. Skirball campus of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Los Angeles. Prior to coming to HUC, Dr. Windmueller had served on the staff of the American Jewish Committee from 1969 to 1972, directed the Albany, New York Jewish Federation from 1973 to 1985, and the JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Committee of Los Angeles Jewish Federation from 1985 to 1995. During his tenure at HUC, Dr. Windmueller served for 10 years as the director of its School of Jewish Nonprofit Management, now called, take it back, and in 2005 was named Dean of the LA campus and served that role until 2010. Between 2012 and 2014, he was invited to teach classes both at USC and Nanjing University in China. The author of 4 books and numerous articles, Professor Windmueller holds a PhD in political science from the University of Pennsylvania. His research has been primarily focused on Jewish communal trends, anti-Semitism, and Jewish political behavior. Stephen's recently edited book, a volume of essays for USC, was published last month, entitled The Impact of the Presidency of Donald Trump on American Jewry and Israel. His articles have appeared in a number of secular and Jewish publications. During this pandemic crisis, Dr. Windmueller has been devoting his research to examining the impact of the coronavirus on the American Jewish community. He serves as a fellow of the Jerusalem Institute of Public Affairs and as a board member of the Pat Brown Institute at Cal State Los Angeles. Over the past 6 years, he's also been on the faculty of the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, teaching across the globe. And my personal preference is my former professor and dean at HUC when I was there. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Stephen Windmueller. Before he and I begin our conversation, he's going to share a few words and some insights onto the current state of the Jewish community. Dr. Windmueller.
Thank you, Jason, and mazel tov to the new and exiting leadership, both for your vision for your community and for the contributions that you have made over these many years. Jason and I have discussed a number of points that we thought would be of critical importance to you in this conversation. And indeed, much of that is tied to what I think are the great challenges facing our community, part of which are driven by COVID, but much of it is demographic, economic, and cultural. And indeed, during the period in which we are finding ourselves, we are experiencing and witnessing the downsizing and closures of a number of our legacy institutions, including synagogues and several of our major national organizations. Part of that fits into a general trend in American society where we are seeing a number of institutions actually leaving the field. What we are also experiencing at this moment is the rise of a kind of virtual Judaism. Even this moment, the experience of holding an annual meeting in a virtual context supports that notion. But it is larger than that in the context that we are now seeing major synagogues across the United States delivering worship services, teaching online, and creating programming that reaches huge audiences far more broadly than ever before. And with my colleague, Ron Wolfson at American Jewish University, we are coming out with a piece about the impact of this virtual experience on American Jewish life over the next few weeks. Indeed, what we have seen as well is a challenge to the idea of peoplehood and communalism, where we see, in fact, a great focus on individualism. Part of this grows out of what I think we have experienced over the past number of years, which is this increasing attention to choice and the ability of individuals to define for themselves a way forward in describing and engaging with American Jewish life. The principle of peoplehood remains powerful based on the Pew 2021 study, where the overwhelming American Jewish audiences that were polled in that study consistently reflect on their pride in being Jewish and on their identity and identification with Israel. But as these symbols remain intact, the reality is that much of what we are actually doing on the ground is very much personalized, distinguished from this notion of the collective, thereby creating a kind of different way by which American Jews are engaging and embracing being part of this idea of the Jewish community. Moving to the next slide. I wonder if we can move to the next slide.
Give me 1 second. It's not working just yet. Hold on, I'm going to take it off for 1 second. Go ahead, Stephen.
So there are other issues that certainly have driven us at this moment. These issues certainly encompass generational challenges. We are seeing a significant transition in Generation Z, something very different from what we have seen with baby boomers and millennials and other generations. Part of this is called the pandemic generation. And what we are experiencing is that from the 2008 economic recession to today's pandemic period, we've seen a unique kind of behavior on the part of younger voters and activists and community members in terms of the choices they are making about their lives and their economic options, which will fundamentally change their behaviors, we believe, moving forward. The other characteristic here is part of what that generation is projecting and part of what we are seeing, as we referenced earlier, is this notion of choice and a kind of privatized Judaism, a personalized Judaism, as expressed by the hundreds, literally hundreds of new organizations that have come into play in the American Jewish scene that cater to individual selections, whether it's the study or the social justice movements, or whether it's engaged with religious inquiry. Much of this privatized or individualized behavior is reshaping how Jews are engaging with their sense of what it may mean to be Jewish in 21st century parlance. The next slide, please. Indeed, as we all know, we are living through one of the most critical moments in American Jewish history. The impact of anti-Semitism since 2015 has profoundly changed and recreated a challenge for our community. The ADL studies, the federal government's reports all indicate not only a heightened degree of this politics of hate directed against Jews, but also directed against other minorities in this society. This is a fundamentally different moment for the American Jewish community as a result. And indeed, the economic picture itself is fundamentally shifting much of what we know about the nature of work in our society and a very clearly changing economy. Part of this is pictured in the context of the fact that we are seeing the downsizing of significant numbers of institutions and the recalibration of what work may mean for many people, where many organizations and institutions in the workforce have shifted to very much of a different framework by which people define and shape their work days and create a different kind of cultural connection to the work experience. The eighth principle here deals with the great move. We are seeing a significant amount of Jewish movement in urban America today. More than 350,000 Jews have left metropolitan New York as an example. Many of them have simply moved to a second home during the period of COVID. Others have moved out of New York State, in many cases to South Florida or to parts of the southwestern United States. We have seen similar trends in the Bay Area based on the San Francisco Jewish Population Survey. And we are likely to see some of those same changes here in Southern California with the results of the Los Angeles Jewish Population Study due out shortly. We believe that California is losing a significant piece of its middle class. Part of that exodus is taking folks elsewhere precisely because of congestion, tax base, and the sort of quality of living issues associated with high density urban American neighborhoods. So this will be an important story moving forward in terms of understanding the transitions of middle-class Americans and Jews in particular to new and different settings. The next slide, please. We are also living amidst a major political trauma that has divided us and that continues to foment a kind of instability in the American political scene that has profound implications for Jews. Jews are amongst the highest voter participants in the United States. We are major donors to both political parties, and we have been catapulted into a kind of high-profile role because of our politicians who may be Jewish, due to the high visibility of Jewish correspondents, journalists, editors, and writers, and due to the principles of the fact that Jews are amongst the major activists in both of these political movements, Democratic and Republican. And finally, we are in the midst of a redefinition of our relationship with the State of Israel. Part of this is generational, as younger Jews do not have the storyline, the history, or the experience of understanding or having been part of the Israel evolution and creation. And that in itself will dictate a very different set of relationships with the State of Israel. And indeed, the State of Israel itself is undergoing significant changes that will have profound effect on the diaspora moving forward. These 10 phenomena are important in understanding what I think will face our communities, our decision-making, and our programming moving forward.
So we're going to do this in a kind of a conversation format with Dr. Windmueller and myself. I'm going to pose a few questions. We'd like to be able to let those of you that have questions as well to be able to ask them, and please utilize the chat format. Dr. Windmueller, I want to start with the idea that of the 10 challenges we had facing, many were happening prior to the pandemic. And I'm assuming that many of them got exacerbated because of the pandemic, specifically national synagogues and other online formats. What has led to these changes in general? Just a kind of a general overview of, in your mind, what has led to these changes? And as a follow-up, what have you begun to see now that these challenges have been shared across the country? How organizations are beginning to think about how to tackle any one of them?
I think, Jason, we begin with generations. The generation transition is phenomenal and significant in that we are now entering the fourth and in some cases even the fifth generation of our American experience. And that factor alone accounts for a huge assimilation and integration into the American populace that fundamentally shifts some of the priorities and behaviors that traditionally define the community. The second, we should not underplay the 2008 economic recession. It was profoundly important for institutions and nonprofits in particular. It created a chain reaction that we are still seeing today in the context of the downsizing of synagogues and other institutions because of the economic fallout of that period. The third reality here is the significant transformation of the American economy. We need to realize that we are moving into a generation of technology that is so fundamentally different from the characteristics of our economy of the latter part of the 20th century, that it will reshape the ways by which business is conducted by means of where information and how information is shared. The social media platforms are a case in point. And the reality of that economic factor is profoundly also disruptive to the careers and choices people are making in their lives. And a fourth factor here that we need to take into account is certainly that American religion itself is fundamentally changing. The rise of the religious nuns, which means that 1/3 of young Americans in general, including the cohort of young American Jews, are either no longer identifying as part of a religion or see themselves as sort of disaffected, if you wish, in the context of the traditional religious modalities. So this is true for Protestant America as it is for Catholics and certainly for liberal American Jews. The outlier here is American Orthodoxy. American Orthodoxy is the fastest growing part of the Jewish communal system. It is also clearly a kind of triumphal moment for American religious traditionalism. And that we will see as a factor in moving forward in both the political work of the Jewish community as well as the social and demographic picture of our community. So these four factors are profoundly important, and we need to account for all of them when looking at these changes. Your second part of your question about how institutions are responding to this introduces also some interesting outcomes. First, we are seeing, as I noted in the opening remarks, this extraordinary outcome of new organizations. We have produced literally hundreds of new Jewish organizations from 1985 to 2005. Part of that is generated by a whole slew of new resources coming into the Jewish community. The most significant, the rise of the Family Foundation, the growth of our communal endowment funds, and the creation of really new assets in our economy that have allowed for these kinds of groups to be born. And they are single issue institutions. And we know a lot of them. American Jewish World Service, J Street, the Republican Jewish Coalition, the National Jewish Democratic Council, the whole array of institutions tied to Israel that are earmarked for very particularized causes and interests, the emergence of social justice institutions, the creation of religious studies institutions. So that has been one of the outcomes. The second has been the reshaping of institutions that are traditional or legacy. So we have seen the mergers over the last number of years of significant numbers of synagogues, the closures of some other institutions, including synagogues. And we have seen efforts at creating far more online and platform-based work and programming by many institutions. And we have seen the shifts taking place in certain organizations which have really refocused their agendas to be responsive to the rise of anti-Semitism, to the anti-Israel agenda, to concerns related to assimilation and acculturation of American Jews. So we are witnessing a significant institutional restructuring as we look at all of this new data.
It's interesting that you brought up the rise of the organizations, because in the late 90s, we had I know that was when United Way went away from their kind of, you have money removed from your paycheck, and they went into their CFC campaign, which allowed individuals to designate specific portions of their money to the specific nonprofit, the causes that they felt more passionate about. It seems to be a nice correlation. And at the same time, all of these umbrella organizations began to need to shift. But it's interesting that you said that the legacy organization, in many ways, which in some ways makes sense, that they're the slower ones to evolve and adapt because you're catering to multi-generational people, that the newer organizations seem to be a little bit leaner and a little more able to pivot quickly to better meet the needs of the community. Is that what you're also seeing as well?
Yes, I mean, I think that those organizations born in the late 20th century and early 21st century took on a lot of the technology, a lot of the sort of strategies associated with sort of the capacity to be fluid in structure and in institutional focus. And that gave them certainly an advantage to some of the more traditional frames of organizing and practice.
Right.
One of the other outcomes here is the significant transition we are seeing in Jewish communal professionalism, meaning, just as we're seeing in the American church world, 20 to 25% of pastors and clergy in the American religious world are leaving. Some of them are leaving as a result of the burnout of the pandemic. Others are leaving because of conflict over the questions of how a religious movement and church organization manages itself during this pandemic. Disagreements over whether you come together or remain apart. Disputes over budgets at a time of limited resources. This is a very challenging moment for Jewish communal professionals, in particular for our rabbinic community. We are looking at church numbers that are really quite extraordinary. We now believe that one in every 4 American churches will go out of existence over the next 5 years. The Roman Catholic Church in North America, the umbrella of the Diocese of North America, has indicated that 3,400 parishes will be closed over these years. We find in the Southern Baptist Church world that some 3,000 churches are designated to be closed, merged, or otherwise integrated into their system. So there is a huge transition in the American religious economy for all kinds of reasons. And we see some of that same behavior certainly inside the Jewish world.
And speaking inside the Jewish world, the idea, you mentioned the Orthodox community, and one of the questions that came in I wanted to ask you is the rise in Orthodoxy due to higher birth rates, or is it more a matter of the authentic messaging that Orthodoxy provides people is what's attracting a larger audience?
I think, frankly, the answer is twofold. That yes, the Pew study confirms the higher rates of Orthodox Jewish families. This has been, however, very much evident already from the 1970s and moving forward. The second factor is the capacity, especially of Chabad, to appeal to the notion of authenticity. And the fact that the Pew study points to the fact that 38% of American Jews have indicated that at some point in their adult lives, they have identified with, supported causes associated with Chabad, which tells us that this does not mean that American Jewry is becoming more traditional per se, but views Orthodoxy and more directly Chabad as a kind of authentic voice within that construct. And that suggests that this is a challenge to many of our liberal religious institutions to assert their presence, their voice in response. We have a very, very high pattern of non-affiliation in the Jewish community with synagogues. Those numbers suggest that less than 30% of American Jews hold synagogue affiliation. But what it also suggests is that Jews are seekers, that is, searching for different ways by which they can participate either in religious or religious educational experiences. And that is the entryway or the pathway forward for some of our institutions to be responsive to that. So yes, the trend lines in American Orthodoxy are to grow, as they will continue to grow by their sheer numbers. The second factor is that they will become politically far more influential on the American scene in the next 25 years. And third, that many American Jews have this association or connection to authenticity, which they view as part of the Orthodox world that liberal Jews or liberal Judaism has not been able to claim or to respond to effectively.
And so speaking about the non-Orthodox community, specifically the conservative movement, the reform movement, even the Reconstructionist movement, it seems that unless they raise their level of authenticity and in many ways a relevancy to people, they are going to have a real struggle moving forward unless more and more people are seeking out what they're delivering and they cannot get somewhere else.
Yes, I mean, I think this is a challenge for the three liberal movements for sure. They are fully aware of this. The difficulty is that their constituencies at this moment tend to be baby boomers and matures. And they are struggling to identify ways to reach deeper into millennials and to Generation Z as a way of capturing elements of those constituencies. Part of the challenge here is that the synagogue world, as with the rest of our society, will increasingly depend on what we have talked about earlier, the ability to virtually create and use social platforms, social media platforms, as well as the capacity to create different venues for reaching audiences. The synagogue is historically seen as sort of the centerpiece of Jewish learning and living. What I think we're seeing in both the church world and in parts of the Jewish community is that Judaism can flourish and will flourish in whatever pockets we are able to create and nurture. So whether there are opportunities to place rabbis, educators, cantors, and others in settings outside of the American synagogue as teachers and as motivators for Jewish learning and participation, that will be part of the challenge that I think federations and synagogues together will need to examine.
It's interesting you talk about putting them outside of the traditional walls of the building or even in the screen of the virtual synagogue right now. One of the things that I've been seeing a lot of is where the successes seem to be coming from. You had as a way to engage and almost reinvigorate Jewish community connection. You had Birthright that came up in the mid 90s, and that catered to the college and post-college age. And where it unfortunately didn't go as far enough, I think, is where PJ Library kind of picked up and really has taken this idea of taking Judaism to the families in a way that is much more of a open-ended and not expectations. It's the community members that sign up and that the community provides the books and helps to build those connections and build those cohort groups that has to really kind of serve as a model for many people to see at how they're doing it in similar ways that Chabad has done for so long, of engaging people where they're at their comfort level with no expectations, just like here we are, we'll give you whatever you need. And when you're ready to move forward to that next level, we're there. Because I think crossing that threshold for so many people is very difficult. I think it's why you've seen the rise of how people feel like they're connecting Jewishly through shows like Steisel and Unorthodox, where they can engage in their Jewish connection. They feel a connection to the Jewish community from watching these things. But in many ways, it doesn't have the same authenticity that the older generations have kind of relied on the movements and their experiences to have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you point out, the various data points that we have from Pew and other studies suggest that this individualized sort of creating of community or engaging in Jewish learning and living is much more personalized. It's much more constructed around avenues of whether it's social media or it's the access to opportunities that lie external to the synagogue, external to the traditional sort of centers of where Jews gather. So that becomes the challenge of our communities, to figure out ways in which we identify and respond to these kinds of new opportunities, in a sense, to reach out and serve our Jewish constituencies.
Along those lines, you know, you're speaking at a Federation annual meeting. You're speaking with me about this. How can federations almost help communities lead moving into trying to confront these challenges in an effective way, knowing full well that these have been going on for decades in many ways? I'm thinking of the concept of no longer feeling like you need to no longer need to belong, that philosophy of bowling alone, that it kind of is mirrored to what the cultural society is happening at the same time. So what can federations like ours do to kind of help impact and not change our community, but recognize the challenges and better meet the challenges to help move people and organizations and the community forward?
So, I mean, I think this operates on a number of different levels. The first is, I think we need to deal with some of the immediate points of tension and concerns that Jews have. And first and foremost is the rise of anti-Semitism. The 2013 Pew study showed almost no concern around that issue. The 2021 study shows this profound and deep directed consideration of that this is a challenge to the American Jewish community. And I think our institutions need to be responsive to that sense of fear and concern. So that is taking a negative and helping to create some kind of positive point of connection and commitment on the part of the institutional Jewish world to respond to that. On the other end of the spectrum, historically, federations and synagogues did not see themselves as a kind of partner in engagement and in building community. Now, in San Gabriel and Pomona, this may be very different, but historically, the major national federations, in a sense, left the synagogue world, our religious schools, our day schools, our camps, and our other instruments of Jewish learning and living to the world of American Jewish religion. It was really literally the church-state separation that our government had imposed was also imposed inside the Jewish community. We need to change that equation radically, because the synagogue world and our day schools, camps, and other institutions need new partners. So they need federation to help in the planning and execution of those relationships. They need foundations and other funders to think creatively and dramatically about programmatic ways of engaging people. And we need to think and look at the American religious world beyond Judaism to see whom else is constructing these different roadways forward. Because I look at some of our smaller communities, including the Church of Latter-day Saints. I look at Rick Warren and some of the evangelical work to get a better sense of how other communities are reaching and engaging and touching their constituencies. And we can certainly take some measure of relief and experience from other religious cultures. So I think there are multiple streams for us to move this forward. Part of this will be online. Part of this will be ultimately back in person. And part of it is to understand that the physical plants of Jewish life, as important and essential as they have been and may become yet again, they are only a piece of the story of this individualized, personalized, seeking choice and opportunity for oneself and one's family.
It's interesting because one of the things I've been thinking about a lot since the pandemic started was the post-pandemic. Let's leave that for a second for the idea, because ultimately we're going to have provided people, these successful organizations are going to have provided people ways to engage Jewishly that did not require them to set foot in the synagogue, attending services. You talk about the National Synagogue, and yet there are still those that are going to go back because that's where they feel most comfortable. But we've almost exacerbated this idea of picking and choosing the aspects of Jewish life and the ways people engage Jewish life because of the pandemic. That in many ways we're catering to that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that in many ways, if the culture is showing this trend, that people are feeling, at least in the Jewish community, a Jewish nun, and are engaging in non-traditional, much more culturally focused aspects of Jewish life, that if we fight against it, we're going to continue pushing them further and further away. While at the same time, the difficulty of how do we keep that authenticity and the traditional aspect of what makes the Jewish community a Jewish community, it's come in conflict in many ways. And I think that we have to do a much better job of recognizing that, accepting people for what they're doing, and in many ways, continue to provide them those avenues that are relevant to them, that they're continuing to choose Jewish, and appreciate the fact that in the midst of everything else they have, they're choosing to engage in some form of Jewish connection, and then continue catering them and remind them of all the other options they have. And if they're not willing to do that, that's fine, but at least we know who they are. At least we know that they are connecting in some way. I think about it from a social work perspective, that we're meeting them where they're at, and that if we don't do that, we're going to continue to make the problem even greater to try to overcome.
Absolutely. I think there are these multiple roads forward, and that's the challenge for institutions to be able to embrace sort of these individualized forms of community building and of personalized Jewish expression.
So one of the questions just came up, and I think it's an important one to understand, is I think we've been focusing on the organizations. And in some ways, because the organizations are the institutions that we can see and feel and touch and taste, what can individuals do to kind of confront these challenges on their own levels?
I mean, I think part of this is to fully realize how diverse and complex the American Jewish community has become. Jews of color, Jews who are expressing themselves in non-religious or non-institutional forms, the alternative systems that we have established of these single issue constituencies, and to, in a sense, become informed about all of these options and all of these behaviors as a way then to make decisions and to better understand what their family members are experiencing, what their friends are telling them, and what the community is, in a sense, struggling with to manage all of this. This is a very different place for the American Jewish community than at any time in our history. And we are structured on a 19th century model, in many cases living with a 20th century agenda, yet we are confronted with a 21st century reality. And that is the challenge, to help all of us understand these complexities, these changes that are happening. And they're happening on the political frame, the economic sphere, certainly in American religion, and certainly in the generational construct that we are seeing.
Staying on the cultural side for a moment, how do the cultural shifts that we currently are seeing impact the ability to financially sustain our existing organizations, or are we already seeing that they can't be sustained in the current format with all of the mergers that were taking place? Look, I know one of the biggest ones that we saw in Southern California was when University Synagogue merged with Wilshire Boulevard. And all of a sudden Wilshire Boulevard now has 3 campuses. I'm assuming they're looking to get rid of one of them, but it was a significant shift. I think in many ways an eye-opening thing, that how could these perceived financially sound organizations that have a long history are facing challenges that I think in many ways, many synagogues are doing it quietly. So what does this impact do to the financial stability of these institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jason, you're correct that there are huge economic challenges already present and others that will be forthcoming. A part of this is to be proactive in sitting with our institutions in our communities to candidly address ways in which we can collectively support one another and figure out ways in which we can collaborate and identify ways by which some institutions will be sunset, will be allowed, in a sense, to leave the scene or to be reinvented in serving in other sort of contexts, constituencies. This is difficult. It's emotionally and psychologically challenging because we are invested in the institutions that our parents and grandparents and our friends have developed, nurtured, and loved. But this is a reality of 21st century society. We identify the fact that there are probably literally hundreds of small synagogues, intermediate congregations around our country, especially in more isolated areas, that are particularly struggling. Because unless there's a continuation of Jewish growth, of families that are not only coming into the community, but that are interested in affiliating and participating, the capacity to sustain and maintain institutions is clearly problematic. So part of this is the capacity of our national and federated agencies to tell the story, meaning, so what is the growth patterns and projected developments look like for our constituencies, for our communities? Here is where I think earlier on we pointed to the shifts in population that we are seeing. We're seeing huge numbers of Jews moving to Texas, Arizona, to Idaho, to Wyoming, to Colorado, and elsewhere. We are also identifying the fact that some of our own constituencies and communities, people are living part of their year outside of their traditional first home to either their second home or vacation site. And part of that is about lifestyle. And therefore, all of that enters into any kind of cohort of thinking of how do you create community when you have population shifts that are significant. And all of that sort of adds to the challenges that are faced. I mean, the first step here is the candid analysis of what is happening on the ground and how, as a collective community, we're going to respond to serve Jews, to engage them, and to create a different kind of communal experience and individualized experience for our folks.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a fascinating time to be thinking about all of these challenges taking place and knowing that it's not just in the Jewish community. Anti-Semitism is one piece, and that is an entirely different obstacle that's unique to the Jewish community. But at the same time, the fact that we're seeing the churches and others, the downsize and the engagement, in some ways, I think it makes it a little bit easier knowing that it's going to be able to be a collective versus just an us having to deal with this, because some of that is major cultural and societal changes that are taking place. But of course, we're concerned about the Jewish community as a whole. You mentioned that the soon to be released, I'm assuming it, I mean, I think it's in a couple of weeks, right? The Southern California Jewish Population Survey. Is there any insight that you may have already received that you can share with us that kind of just illustrates a little bit?
I'm not really privy to the
Okay, then never
data,
mind.
so I can't
But I think
shed any light on it. I mean, I can give you some suppositions.
Sure.
I think our numbers will be down, meaning fewer Jews in the greater Los Angeles area than we had projected. I think secondly, that the level of birth rates amongst Jews continues to be at 1.8. That is, for a Jewish household, the odds are that they will have had one child, at most two. But in contrast to our Orthodox friends, far fewer children. That anti-Semitism will be confirmed as being a challenging and threatening issue for our community. The Jews remain overwhelmingly liberal based on the data we have from Pew and every other study, that we can pretty well project the fact that the Jewish community of Southern California in this area has seen a significant outmigration of Jews moving to areas outside of Los Angeles City, to parts of the eastern part of the county, as well as to the north and western parts of our county. That is a pattern we are generally already have observed, and we see that also by the changes in the kinds of institutions that have emerged in parts of Calabasas and the West Valley and beyond, and parts of what you're seeing certainly in the eastern part of the county. And I think we can also project the fact that we will see a significant growth in Los Angeles proper of Orthodox families, as we will see the continued decline of affiliation with mainline liberal synagogues.
Wow, it'll be interesting, because as I've been sitting and watching and reading the 2013 Pew and then analyzing it compared to the 21, that I think in many ways it's an eye-opening thing, because the results that come out all of a sudden become very shocking. I remember in the 80s when intermarriage all of a sudden hit 50%, and it was a shock, and everyone kind of addressed that. And how do we engage that? And in many ways, many of the movements specifically said, okay, well, if this is the trend, we need to welcome them in, provide the experiences. And I think that we're in a period of time, as you mentioned when you started, a significant transition is about to begin or has already taken place. And we don't know how long it will be to try to take a hold of these challenges, recognize them, acknowledge them, and then bring the collective heads together to figure out ways to do that. And so I want to thank you so much for spending the morning with us and sharing these insights to us. I think it was a perfect understanding and a explanation for our community to be aware of these challenges that are currently taking place, and how institutions are already beginning to think about and make it a part of their visioning and their thought process in their strategic aspects of what they're going to be doing moving forward. So on behalf of the community, thank you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Windmueller was one of my professors, and it's always wonderful to be able to reintroduce some of the brilliant minds that come out of HUC to our community. And so thank you so much for spending the day with us.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cantor Judy Sofer, who will enter our next phase of the annual meeting.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be the one to introduce our Volunteer of the Year, Edie Taylor. She sent me a bio about the things that she's done, but before I read some of the things that she mentioned, I'd also like to say that for me, she has been one of the dearest people of the community up there. I've known her since 1994. She was always there to help, not only in a general way, but always in a personal way through my son's bar mitzvahs, all of the different things that happened for me. And I am in love with this woman forever and ever. And we all call her Aunt Edie. And so I'm going to read what she wrote here. In June of 1947, she moved with her parents to California from New Jersey. Her twin brothers were already here, and you may have known them. They stayed in Pasadena until they moved to Ridgely Drive in LA, and she was 20 years old. At 20, she joined the LA chapter of Junior Hadassah, which eventually became part of the parent group of Hadassah. She became president of Junior Hadassah in 1949, and Rabbi Jacob Pressman of Temple Beth Am was her advisor, and he later officiated at her wedding. She moved to Pasadena in 1964 with her husband Sam and children Gary and Janet. She became a Cub Scout leader for her son's group and later became the leader of her daughter's Campfire Girls Bluebird group, and this was through Webster School. She joined the temple, enrolled the children in religious school, and joined Sisterhood. Immediately given the position of recording secretary. She's been on the Sisterhood board ever since. Do you ever get tired, Edie? No, you better not answer. And she's had every position except treasurer. She was a Sisterhood president in 1991-92 after her husband's death. She was the VP for Torah Fund for 4 years, and then she took over the temple's MAC, which is the Membership Assistance Committee. She helped families dealing with illness and death, made sure there was food at the home after the funeral. They visited the sick. They brought flowering plants before high holidays and Passover food before Passover. And she chaired this for many, many years with willing help from temple members. Sometime during the early 90s, she began editing The Flame, and she's continued to this day. She learned to edit when she worked at Caltech, and it came in handy. She worked with Bruce Applebaum, who was at the temple manager at the time, the office manager, and learned from him to set up the format and kept copies of all these years. Recently, she turned over all of her Flame archives to John Carlton, and he's saving them on a flash drive, changing formats. So her new archive starts with 2021. In 1995, the temple's remodeling project began, and she was on the committee to select the new folding doors. They visited several congregations that had recently gone through remodeling, and they liked their new folding doors. So she met a woman that she knew from Women's League, and she said that while she was doing this visitation to the different temples, she met a woman from Women's League at one of the temples. And how are you? And this woman said that was her day to volunteer, and that's why she was at her temple that day, the day that Edie visited. So that gave Edie the idea that at PJTC they should do the same. With the assistance of Stuart Miller, when he became president of the temple, they set up the rules and arrangements for the office volunteer committee, which is ongoing to this day. She interviews candidates, gives them a folder of instructions, and arranges their schedule, which is a half day per week. And they let her know when they will be away. And then she'll try to get a substitute. After a number of years, she began to give birthday parties for all the volunteers, staff, and clergy. And now monthly, she bakes a cake and brings other items for a light lunch. She sends happy birthday from everyone, these cards to all of these people, even during the COVID epidemic, as the volunteers had time off during this period. And she said now they're starting to get back into service, and she's replacing those who left the committee because she's still in charge of it. After the remodeling of the temple, she was upset that nothing was done to fix the old kitchen, and with the help of Ricky Lane and Nancy Carlton, they worked on smaller repairs to the main kitchen and the Woolman Hall kitchen. She hired a contractor and used Sisterhood's kitchen fund to pay for the repairs, and she's very gratified that now, with PJTC's fundraising for their centennial birthday coming up, the main kitchen will be upgraded to modern-day service. She's always been there and always involved, and she is a quiet voice among all of us people that make a lot more noise than she does. She was honored twice, thank God, by the Men's Club. First, when they were still a B'nai B'rith organization in 2006, and then later when it was the PJTC Men's Club and got going with the transfer of the Sharei Torah group. She assisted them in several ways, and she's very proud of their accomplishments. She was again honored by the men on February 20th, 2020, and she has been a member from the beginning. When I left PJTC, she got more involved with the Federation, with me and our cultural arts program, and she started and joined the JFed Players, which is our theater ensemble. She sells tickets at all of our shows. We never do anything before checking in with Edie first. She's the one that brings up other people to help her, and she knows all the ins and outs of how we go about doing that. And it's been fabulous. She joined in the program Everyone Has a Name, which the Federation has produced the past 2 years and is continuing this year. It has great meaning for her as she lost most of her family in the Holocaust. Even though she no longer drives, she has wonderful friends that make sure that she gets to her projects and many other appointments. She's had many honors during these years at PJTC. A few of them are 1986, she was Sisterhead's Torah Fund Chayei Olam honoree. 1998, she was PJTC's Congregant of the Year. 2001, she was a Woman Who Makes a Difference, which is a joint honor at that time from Sisterhood of the Temple and the Federation here. 2006, the Men's Club honored her again, and 2020, PJTC Men's Club also honored her. You are amazing, Edie. I wish there were more of you. You are a singularly fabulous person, generous, humble, kind, loving. You are a big part of all of our lives. I'm so glad that you're here to receive this honor of Volunteer of the Year for the Jewish Federation of the Greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys.
Edie, oh, there you go. Perfect.
Hold on one second, Edie. Hold on one second. We can't hear you. So if we can figure out a way to get her heard, that would be great. In the meantime, while we're getting that fixed, Edie, I want to share with you that your name will be listed on this perpetual plaque. It's already right here. It actually is, and this also hangs in the Federation's office. It says Volunteer of the Year in recognition of an individual or individuals who have given invaluable time and energy to further the mission of the Federation and strengthen the Jewish community of the Greater San Gabriel Pomona Valleys. The recipient is chosen for exceptional volunteer service and commitment to the Jewish community that is beyond expectations. We honor the recipients listed below. So if we get close, Edie, yours is right here. And next time you come to the office, we will make sure that you see it. So thank you.
Cantor Ruth, you should be able to unmute.
Cantor Ruth, are we okay?
There we go.
Okay. Thank you both, Judy and Jason. Thank you so much. I started out to thank them in my little speech here, to thank my friends at the Jewish Federation for this wonderful honor. Jason Moss, our super executive director, and Judy Sofer, who has been my good friend for many, many years, and is the director of our cultural arts program, and those who are on the board of directors from all parts of our valleys. If a situation arises that affects our Jewish population, you can be sure Jason will have stepped in to clear it up. This is a wonderful group of people who have brought me great honor and credits to the Jewish residents of this area. I am very proud to be part of them. I also want to thank the members of my own shul, Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center, Rabbi John Carrier, Cantor Ruth Berman Harris, and our terrific Executive Director, Burl Strauss. I learned a lot during my many years of volunteering here and treasure the honor of thanking all of you from my very own bima. This is where I had 2 bat mitzvahs right from this spot. As far as my activities at the Federation, I am proud to be a charter member of the J-Fed Players, our theater group sponsored by the Cultural Arts Foundation under Cantor Judy's supervision. I don't perform, but my job is very important. I sell tickets. When you come to one of our productions, you will see me near the door, selling tickets, checking the names of the pre-sold list. When I consider the many hours our actors donate to rehearse and perform and enjoy doing it, I am grateful for the pleasure I get from attending one of their shows. So I hope you will forgive me if I use this opportunity to plug our next production. It's called Grumpy Old Men, which is now a musical comedy. When you get the notice of the show, please put your tickets in order for dated between March 26th and April 3rd. We're going to be doing an indoor production. It's at the Porticos Theater, which is in the back of St. James Church, not very far from here at Washington Boulevard and Pepper Drive. Again, thank you all for this wonderful honor. I will try to continue to deserve it.
We're going to have a chance to celebrate Edie at the end of the meeting. We'll ask everyone to unmute and say a few words to Edie as we can. But Edie, thank you so much. And you all heard her, many of you know her, but the thing that struck me the most was she referred to our production and that value of understanding that feeling of connection and part of it. And I just want to say thank you so much, Edie, for all you did. Normally, again, unfortunately, we had hoped to be able to do this in person. It was a very hard decision to make about moving the meeting virtually. And one of the major considerations was how I wanted to make sure we could celebrate Edie. As I mentioned in the email we sent a couple weeks ago when we announced the shift from in-person to virtual, we will be holding some form of a recognition event for Federation's volunteers and committee members, as well as honoring Edie during that. So please watch your mailboxes, both virtual and real mailboxes, when that date gets scheduled. So let me now move into kind of an update of looking back at 2021 and then what we have coming forward. So 2021, just like 2022, will go down in the record books as a year to be remembered or forgotten, depending on how you look at it. Despite the constant ups and downs, twists and turns, the Jewish Federation continued to work to engage with and keep our community connected. Before I highlight all we did in 2021, I want to thank you and the entire community. Everything we were able to do this past year was made possible because of you, the community. Together, we made people feel supported and less isolated, while at the same time, we developed new ways for all of us to stay connected. In so many ways, you were able to help us continue to fulfill our mission to build community by strengthening and enhancing Jewish life in the greater San Gabriel and Pomona Valleys. On behalf of the staff and Federation Board, thank you. So here's a short list of what we were able to do with your support. January, we came back together, virtually of course, for our third installment of Every Person Has a Name. Over 130 volunteers read over 6,100 names of those who were murdered during the Holocaust. Volunteers signed up for 10-minute reading increments. It took a lot of coordination, but we wanted to make sure that we could provide this important community event that so many people find value in. We conducted our community survey, as Julie mentioned during her remarks, that provided us valuable insight into who our community is and how they feel the Jewish Federation can better meet the collective community needs. We shared the results with our community partners and presented the survey findings with the community through articles in JLife SGPV and a virtual town hall meeting hosted by me. We'll continue to use this information, as Julie mentioned, in planning programs and what services we should be providing in the coming year. And as it appeared that we would soon be returning to in-person activities and work, we coordinated a community-wide security training over Zoom with Secure Community Networks, a program of Jewish Federation of North America, to better prepare and train all of us in security procedures and protocols. Camp Gan Shalom returned this summer with a complete in-person program. Our campers had an amazing summer without a single COVID outbreak or illness, thanks in large part to the tremendous work and preparation of our camp director, Ben Phelps, and his amazing camp staff. We look forward to holding camp again this summer from June 13th through August 5th. You can look for the information coming in the next few weeks. As was alluded to earlier, Cultural Arts was busy as well, between their pandemic playhouse performances, to their monthly play readings, to a fall outdoor production of Scapino. Plus, we launched a brand new program, Jewish Cooking Connections. These monthly cooking shows, under the direction of Cantor Judy Sofer and support from Lori McKenna and Robin Evans, featured and Joanne Carr, who edited the videos, featured local community members in the kitchen preparing traditional Jewish foods and sharing family recipes. And after a highly successful all virtual festival in 2020, the 23rd annual Jewish Book Festival returned with another incredible lineup of authors, made possible through the tireless efforts of our incredible Jewish Book Festival Committee under the guidance of Kim Banaji and the tremendous financial support of our Literary Circle members. This year's festival was wonderful and had something for everyone. And if you missed any of the authors, you can see them by clicking the links from our Jewish Federation website or on our YouTube channel. There you can view all of our recorded events, including the Jewish Cooking Connection episodes and more. Jewish Federation also helped secure significant funding for our community partners to purchase necessary technical equipment to ensure that their respective services and programs could be provided in the highest quality for both in-person and those who attended virtually. And in May, when Israel was under the onslaught of missile and rocket attacks from Gaza, we kept the community informed during the entire incident of what was taking place with daily emails and updates. Perhaps what I am most proud of this past year was how PJ Library expanded its programs and outreach to families who were not able to come together since children were not eligible for COVID vaccines. Our PJ Library program sent activities directly to families with 5 engagement kits, either personally delivering them or mailing them throughout the year. These kits included everything from craft projects and recipes to not only celebrate the holidays, but also for families to celebrate Judaism together. These kits were enjoyed by over 200 families. And during the year, we also saw a significant increase in our PJ Library and PJ ROA participants, now exceeding over 1,300 children from birth through 12 years old. And during Hanukkah, PJ Library sponsored a special family concert with Jason Meshes that included a moment where children throughout our community lit their Hanukkah menorahs together on Zoom. It was breathtaking and powerful to know that even in the darkest times, Judaism was flourishing and thriving. So looking ahead to 2022, in just under 2 weeks, every person has a name is returning back to Pasadena City Hall and to a screen near you. And this year we will be marking the 80th anniversary of the Babi Yar massacre by reading the names of the 33,000 Jews who were murdered during this horrific incident. We will once again have an exhibition from Yad Vashem that we're doing in partnership with them, and it was made possible by PJTC's Sisterhood with their support. There are still a handful of volunteer names reading spots available, actually only 2 in person in the very early mornings, as well as many available for those who want to participate virtually. We're excited to announce that we have just launched a new program called the Chesed Society. This new program brings together visionary leaders and supporters who are dedicated to help the Jewish Federation fulfill its mission through their financial support. You will be hearing more about this group in the weeks and months ahead. We will also soon be announcing a new scholarship later this spring that high school juniors will be eligible to apply for. The funds for this scholarship program were made possible from the money we raised a couple of years ago through our special youth fund campaign, as well as money that came from Weitzman Day School after they closed in 2020. In August of 2021, I began working with our local grocery chains, including Ralph's and Vaughn's, to partner with them to ensure that the Passover food our community is looking for will be available this Passover. While it may not be at your local store, we'll be sharing with the community where the largest Passover selections will be throughout our entire community. We're also currently planning to return back to Israel with our next community trip in May. If you are interested, please contact Cantor Judy Sofer about this amazing 14-day trip that will begin in the middle of May. With J-Life SGPV being forced to only be available digitally, the Jewish Federation has been looking at new and different ways to keep all of us informed and connected. With this in mind, in the next month or so, the Federation will be creating a new newsletter. This newsletter will come out about 3 times a year, and we'll highlight past programs, promote upcoming programs, share stories of how the Jewish Federation is helping and impacting the lives of community members. In essence, trying to keep the entire community informed and connected. And as Edie mentioned, our next JFED production will be the musical Grumpy Old Men. Rehearsals are beginning later this month. This musical is adapted from the 1993 movie with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and it will hit the stage at the end of March. We'll also be hopefully partnering with the Pasadena Playhouse for another Holocaust stage reading in April to commemorate Yom HaShoah. And one final note. Although we spent quite a bit of time on this year's Jewish Food Festival in hopes of bringing it back, it may need to be postponed this year again due to the current COVID restrictions and our concern of bringing that many people together when the pandemic will most likely still be affecting our lives. Please know that if it does get canceled this year, we're still planning to bring it back to the community as soon as we can do it safely. So all of this, as I mentioned at the start, was made possible by so many people, by the community, for your support in the valuable work we do to ensure that we have a strong and vibrant community. To our staff, I have to tell you, this staff, the dedication that they bring each and every day to our community is amazing. Thank you for all you do on behalf of and for the community. Our community is stronger because of you. And we're excited to have Rebecca Russell as our new Program and Community Outreach Director. She began this past week, and we're so excited to have her as part of our staff team. And I would be remiss to not say a few words about Kim Benaji, who will be leaving us at the end of this month. Kim began with us about 5.5 years ago, and even though she and her family moved back to Israel in September, she continued to work with us, taking the idea of telecommuting to a whole new level, in order to ensure that the programs she oversaw continue to be provided and offered to our community. During that time, she brought so much to our community through her genuine passion and commitment to ensure that everything we do be done with the utmost professionalism. And as a reminder, and I will never forget this, it was her idea that we needed a community-wide Holocaust commemoration that has led us to Every Person Has a Name. We're going to miss you, Kim, and want to thank you for all you gave us during your time with us, and of course, while in Israel, as you telecommuted after your family moved. Toda Rabah, Kim. You will be missed, and your legacy here will remain for a very long time. Thank you also to our Board of Governors for your dedication, partnership, guidance, and support in the work we do together for the community. It is an absolute pleasure to work with each and every one of you. And lastly, to John. I've been very lucky having the right president at the right time step up and help lead the organization. John, for 4 years and to help us get through the COVID pandemic with your guidance. On behalf of all of us, thank you so much for all you've given, and I'm so glad you're staying on as our CFO. Earlier today, I presented John with a gavel as a way for him to commemorate his time as president. This is a tradition we have had for all of our past presidents, many of them actually on this call, on this meeting today. So John, on behalf of all of us in our community, our staff and the Federation's Board of Governors, thank you for the past 4 years of dedication and service. And Julie, I want to assure you that we're not asking a next president to have a term of 4 years. At the time, we had some issues that we had to work through, and John was willing to stay on for an additional 2. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of you once again. I look forward to working with all of you to help make 2022 another unforgettable year. So as we conclude our annual meeting, I once again want to say thank you also to PJTC and Nancy Carlton because of their patience and understanding as we had to make the difficult decision to switch from being in person and virtual to only being virtual. Your support and dedication is greatly appreciated. And Nancy, we look forward to having you cater a future event for us. And we were really looking forward to having you cater this one, but unfortunately we were not able to have that. I do want to call your attention to a few events. I mentioned every person has a name. Remember, if you're not signed up to read the names, it's okay to just come and sit and be amongst the people as they read the names. That can happen in person at Pasadena City Hall, as well as on the screen. We will be streaming it live, and we will be doing that in a way to make sure that there is physical distance, social distancing, following all COVID restrictions. If you are planning to attend the commemoration ceremony that will feature many of our elected officials, I would ask that you please wear a mask. This way we can ensure that we can keep all of us as safe as possible. We mentioned the Israel trip coming up in May. We mentioned the production of Grumpy Old Men, Camp, and many other options. Through all of this year, really the last 18 to 20 months, the Jewish community in the entire world has had to pivot and be flexible. And we appreciate the flexibility all of you have given in the understanding that although we would much rather be holding this in person, just like all of our events, we made the decision to make the switch to keep all of us safe. And we'll continue to keep those thoughts in mind, not just the Federation, but all of our community partners will be doing the same. We will get through this. Whether COVID will be in the rearview mirror or it'll be a part of our lives forever, we won't have to deal with it as much as we are currently. So on behalf of the Jewish Federation's Board of Governors, our new president, Julie Solberg, our outgoing president, John Carlton, our new officers, and our current board members and staff, thank you so much for joining us for this annual meeting. I want to go ahead and unmute everybody and allow you to talk and mingle and socialize, also share kind words for Edie because we couldn't do it in person. So once again, thank you all so much.